Hei, nå skal du lese denne teksten som handler om urbefolkninger i verden. I hvert fall i noen engelskspråklige land. Nå det viktig at du lærer deg de nye ordene som står på hver side. Sånn at du kan bruke disse når du skal ha en muntlig framføring eller en muntlig samtale med læreren. Vi gjennomgår ganske raskt de nye ordene her. Du ser forskjell på disse to, people og peoples. Når vi sier people, så betyr det mennesker eller personer. Når vi legger på en ekstra S, så blir det en helt ny betydning for ordet. Da betyr ordet folkeslag eller folkegrupper. Peoples, people. Se forskjell. Vi har noen nye ord. Gjenta etter meg nå. Indigenous peoples. Tribal people. Native people. Population. The UN estimates. Tribes. In common. Connection. Ancestors. Invaded. Minority. Suppressed. Forced to. The main culture. Dette kan du øve på og få riktig uttale, men så må du også vite hva det betyr på norsk, sånn at du kan bruke det riktig. Ok. Jeg leser ikke veldig fort, men du kan pause videoen. Når jeg har lest en setning, så kan du øve på å lese den samme med samme uttale som meg. Bruk ørene dine godt, sånn at du legger merke til hvordan alle ord uttales. Da starter jeg. Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples are sometimes called First People, Tribal People, or Native People. About 5% of the world's population belong to indigenous groups. The UN estimates that there are more than 5,000 tribes of indigenous peoples in the world. Each indigenous group is unique, but they also have some things in common. They usually have a special connection to the land they live on and to nature. Their ancestors lived there before other groups invaded it. They often have their own language, and they are often a minority in their own country. Many indigenous groups have been suppressed and forced to become part of the main culture. They have not been allowed to speak their own language, wear their own clothes, or keep their own religion. Så før vi går videre nå, skal vi gjennomgå noen nye ord som du finner på denne siden. Native Americans, Inuit, Maori, Aboriginal people, the Sami people, arrived, teepees, feather, bonnets, reservations, harsh winter weather, hundreds of thousands, settlers, diseases, remove, reviving, poverty. Nå har du øvd på disse engelske ordene. Nå må du også lære deg hva de betyr på norsk. Da leser vi fra toppen. There are many indigenous peoples in the English-speaking world. The Native Americans, the Inuit in the Arctic, the Maori in New Zealand, and the Aboriginal people in Australia. In Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia, we find the Sami people. Native Americans. Native Americans had lived on the American continent for thousands of years when the Europeans arrived. No one knows exactly how many they were, perhaps several million. There were many different tribes with their own ways of life, cultures and languages. Some tribes were nomads, others were fishermen, farmers or hunters. We often think of Native Americans as people who were riding horses, hunting buffalo, living in teepees, and wearing feather bonnets. This was the way of life of the tribes on the prairie. The European settlers who came to the USA wanted more and more land. The Native Americans were forced to move from their land onto reservations. Some tribes walked hundreds of miles with little food and sometimes in harsh winter weather to get to the reservations. Many people died on these long marches. Aborigines. Aborigines are one of the oldest populations in the world. They came to Australia about 70,000 years ago. There were hundreds of thousands of Aborigines in Australia when the European settlers came. Many Aborigines died from the diseases brought by the Europeans. In the late 1800s, the Australian government started to remove many Aboriginal children from their families. Some thought it would be better for the children to grow up in white Christian families. Others thought this was a good idea to assimilate the Aboriginal people. Some had to work as slaves for the Europeans. Today, the Aborigines make up about 2.5% of the population, and their culture is reviving. Still, many of them live in poverty. Maori. The Maori came to New Zealand in canoes from the Polynesian islands around 1250 to 1300. When the Europeans arrived in the 1700s, they brought diseases and war, and many Maori people died. Some of the tribes disappeared. Today, the Maori make up 15% of the population in New Zealand. Many live modern Western lives, but many also have lower incomes and face more social problems than the rest of the population. Challenges. Før vi leser den siste delen, skal vi gjennomgå de siste nye ordene. Disappeared. Make up. Incomes. Endangered. Suffer from. Average. Population. Abuse. Environmentally friendly. Climate change. Exploitation. Natural resources. Protect. Environment. Discrimination. Okay, now let's read the last part of the text about the indigenous peoples. Challenges. Many indigenous groups are endangered. These groups suffer more from poverty than the average population. Poverty can lead to social problems like alcohol abuse and bad health. There is a lot to learn from indigenous peoples. Their ways of life are more environmentally friendly than modern life. Climate change and the exploitation of natural resources threaten the way indigenous peoples live. In 2007, the UN presented the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It says that the indigenous peoples have the right to land and resources. The declaration was also meant to protect their environment and culture.